I never thought my daughter's first cry would be the sound that saved my life. That night, the waves outside our Malibu glass mansion roared like a storm. But inside, everything felt still, perfect, almost too perfect. I was holding Harper, barely 3 months old, as her tiny chest rose and fell against mine. My wife, Savannah, was curled up on the couch across from me, her hazel eyes soft with exhaustion, her blonde hair messy but beautiful under the dim glow of the fireplace. We had everything. A thriving luxury real estate empire, a modern cliffside home worth $25 million, and the kind of love people dream about but rarely find. And yet, deep inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that happiness like this doesn't come without a price. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 34, founder of Cole Estates, one of California's fastest-growing real estate firms. People love to paint me as the golden boy, the orphan who escaped a broken home, built his own empire, and married the woman of his dreams. But what they don't know is that I ran hard and far, from a past so rotten I stopped calling it mine. I hadn't spoken to my family in 12 years. Until 3 weeks ago. It started with a handwritten letter slipped into my office mailbox. No return address, no name. Just 6 chilling words. Blood always comes back for blood. I thought it was a prank at first. Maybe from some bitter competitor jealous of our growing market share in Malibu and Beverly Hills. But Savannah noticed something. I didn't. The handwriting. It was shaky but familiar. It belonged to my mother. I hadn't heard from her since I was 22. Back then, I left our cracked little home in Stockton with nothing but a duffel bag, a gas station sandwich, and a promise to myself. I will never be like them. My father, Richard, was a man with fists harder than his words and debts heavier than his conscience. My mother, Diane, was quieter, but no less cruel, her manipulations cutting deeper than any bruise. When I left for good, or so I thought. The night the letter arrived, Savannah urged me to throw it away, but I couldn't. Something about the timing bothered me. It came just as Cole Estates had closed our biggest deal yet, a sprawling oceanfront estate that doubled our profits overnight, and then strange things began happening. First, the security alarms at our gated mansion triggered twice in the same week. Both times there was no forced entry, then Savannah started getting anonymous calls in the middle of the night, whispers on the other end, followed by silence. And 2 days ago, as I pulled into our driveway after a late meeting, I found a single black feather resting on the hood of my car. It sounds absurd, I know. It's standing there in the cold sea air, staring at that feather. Ow. I couldn't shake the memory of something my mother used to whisper whenever she was drunk. The blackbird comes before the fall. I thought I'd buried that part of my life, but it was clawing its way back. Savannah tried to soothe me, saying it was paranoia, stress, exhaustion from the new baby. I wanted to believe her. But that illusion shattered last night. I woke around 2 a.m. to Harper's piercing cries. Savannah was asleep, so I stumbled to the nursery. The moonlight flooded the room through the floor-to-ceiling windows, silvering Harper's crib. I reached for her and froze. The mobile above her crib was moving, not slowly, not with the lazy sway of ocean breeze, but spinning violently, fast, like someone had just touched it. I spun around, scanning the room, my pulse pounding. Nothing. I grabbed Harper and rushed back to our bedroom, holding her so tightly she squirmed. Savannah stirred awake, startled, and before I could explain, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. What? A text message. No name, no number. Check the cameras. I fumbled for my phone, logging into our security system app. When the feed opened, I almost dropped the phone. There, on the front lawn, bathed in moonlight, stood a figure, motionless, staring straight at the house. And though the face was shadowed, I knew it was my brother. The brother I buried 12 years ago, or at least I thought I did. I slammed the phone down, my hands shaking, my heart tearing between terror and disbelief. If that was really him, then nothing about my life, my safety, my family, my future, was what I thought it was. And deep down, a voice I didn't want to hear whispered the truth. I hadn't escaped my family. I'd brought them back from the dead. But why now? Why after all these years? What did blood for blood mean? Savannah touched my shoulder, her voice trembling. Ethan, what's happening? I stared at the spinning mobile, still swaying in the nursery, at Harper's tiny fists clenched in sleep, and felt a cold certainty settle in my chest. Whatever was coming, it had already begun. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house, every crash of the waves outside our glass walls sounded like footsteps creeping closer. By dawn, my entire body was buzzing with adrenaline, my mind caught in a storm of questions I couldn't escape. Was it really my brother? No, it couldn't be. Caleb died 12 years ago. I was there. I saw the body. I still remember the cheap funeral home in Stockton, the faint smell of formaldehyde clinging to the air, and the closed casket my parents insisted on. Back then, I didn't question it. I was too numb, too busy planning my own escape from that house of shadows. But now, staring at the frozen security footage on my phone, I couldn't deny it. The figure on my lawn had Caleb's shoulders, his posture, even the faint tilt of his head. Exactly the same. Ethan, Savannah whispered from behind me, her voice husky from sleep. What if it's just someone pretending to be him? I wanted to agree. God, I wanted to. But there was one thing Savannah didn't know. Caleb and I had a secret. When we were kids, long before our family collapsed into chaos, we'd invented a little code to communicate whenever our father's rage erupted. 3 knocks meant hide in the attic. 2 knocks meant run out the back door. Last night, just before I grabbed Harper, I heard it. 2 soft knocks on the nursery wall. I didn't tell Savannah. Couldn't. Instead, I called my head of security, a retired LAPD detective named Marcus Hall. He arrived by noon, his 6'4" frame casting a long shadow on our driveway. I showed him the footage. Marcus frowned, arms crossed. It could be a stalker, someone digging into your past. I'll sweep the grounds, review the logs, and pull the backups from the gate cameras. We'll find out who the hell this is. But by evening, Marcus returned pale and grim. Ethan, there's nothing. No footprints, no gate breach, no tampering on the feeds. Savannah shot me a worried look. So what, the guy just vanished? Marcus hesitated before saying the weird part. Whoever this was knew where the blind spots are. They avoided every single angle but one, the one where they wanted you to see them. My stomach dropped. This wasn't random. It was deliberate. That night, I sat by Harper's crib until dawn, clutching an old baseball bat I hadn't touched in years. My mind kept drifting back to my parents, Diane and Richard, and the last fight I'd had with them before I left. I'd accused them of ruining Caleb, of pushing him into things no kid should ever see, things I still can't talk about. My father threw a glass at me that night. My mother screamed that if I walked out, I was dead to this family. I walked out anyway. Now it felt like the family I buried was clawing its way out of the grave. 2 days later, Savannah convinced me to go into the office, to focus on something normal. So I drove up the Pacific Coast Highway to Cole Estate's headquarters, a sleek, Stellan glass masterpiece perched above Zuma Beach. But when I stepped into my office, there was an envelope sitting neatly on my desk. No postage, no fingerprints. Inside was a single photograph. Caleb, standing in front of a burned-down house I didn't recognize. Wearing the same clothes from the security footage. On the back, scrawled in that same shaky handwriting as the first letter, "You shouldn't have left. Now she pays." I gripped the photo so tightly, it nearly tore. Who was she? Savannah Harper. I raced home, ignoring calls, my mind a blur of fear. When I burst through the front door, I found Savannah in the living room, holding Harper. She looked up, startled. "Ethan, what's—" She stopped when she saw my face. "Pack a bag," I said, my voice hoarse. "We're leaving tonight." Savannah's lips trembled. "Where are we going?" "Anywhere they can't find us." But it was already too late. As I walked past the kitchen counter, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A black feather, placed carefully on top of Harper's baby monitor. Savannah gasped, clutching Harper tighter. I picked it up with shaking hands and turned it over. There, scratched faintly into the shaft, were 3 tiny letters burned into the quill. CC, Caleb Cole. My dead brother's initials. Then for the first time in 12 years, I realized something horrifying. Maybe Caleb never died, or worse, maybe my parents lied about everything. I thought I'd buried my past, but as I stood there in the kitchen, clutching that black feather with my brother's initials carved into it. I understood something terrifying. The past hadn't stayed dead. It had been waiting, watching, for the perfect moment to come back and burn everything I'd built to the ground. Savannah sat on the couch holding Harper, her knuckles white around the baby's blanket. "Ethan," she whispered, "I can't do this. What the hell is happening? Who's doing this to us?" I couldn't answer her, because deep down I knew the truth. If Caleb was alive, then my parents had lied about everything. And if they'd lied about Caleb, what else were they hiding? That night, after putting Harper to bed, I called someone I swore I'd never speak to again, my mother. I dug her old number out of an encrypted drive, one I hadn't touched in years. It rang 3 times. Then a voice older and raspier than I remembered answered. "Ethan." She knew it was me, without me saying a word. I didn't respond at first. My jaw locked, my chest tight. Finally I said, "Where's Caleb?" Silence. "Don't lie to me, Mom. I saw him." Her breath hitched audibly on the other end. Then she whispered something so faint I almost didn't catch it. "You should have stayed gone." Then she hung up. I stared at the phone, my hands trembling. The next day, I drove back to Stockton for the first time in 12 years. The air was heavy with the kind of dust and desperation I remembered from my childhood. Our old house still stood at the edge of a dying cul-de-sac, paint peeling, yard overgrown, windows clouded with grime. As I stepped onto the porch, I noticed something strange. The doorframe had new locks, reinforced steel bolts. Security cameras perched above the corners of the house like watchful eyes. Before I could knock, the door opened. My father stood there, older, thinner, but those cold gray eyes hadn't aged a day. "Well," he said flatly, leaning on the doorframe. "Look who decided to crawl back." "Where's Caleb?" I asked. Something in his face twitched, just for a second, before he masked it under a bitter smirk. "Dead, same as always." "Bullshit," I spat. "I saw him, on my lawn, in Malibu." My father's hand tightened on the doorframe until his knuckles turned white. "You need to leave," he said, his voice low, "before you get all of us killed." That stopped me cold. "All of us?" I repeated. "What the hell are you talking about?" But before he could answer, a voice floated from deeper inside the house. "Richard, who's at the door?" My mother stepped into view. She looked different, not older, just harder, as if the years had carved something sharp and hollow into her. The moment her eyes landed on me, she froze. Then, without a word, she slammed the door shut. I stood there, stunned, until I heard the click of 3 separate locks sliding into place. Back in Malibu, I couldn't shake the encounter. My parents were terrified of something, or someone, and every instinct screamed that Caleb was at the center of it. That night, I poured myself a glass of bourbon and sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific. The moon reflected off the waves like fractured glass. Then my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Ethan." My blood froze. "Oh." It was Caleb's voice. Lower, rougher, but I'd know it anywhere. "You need to stop digging," he said. "Forget Stockton. Forget me. Forget everything. If you keep going, she dies." "She? Who the hell are you talking about?" I demanded. "Silence, Caleb. Where are you? What's going on?" But he'd already hung up. When I turned, Savannah was standing in the doorway, pale and trembling. "Who was that?" she asked softly. I opened my mouth, but couldn't form the words, because there was something worse than his voice on the call. In the background, faint but unmistakable, I'd heard Harper crying. I tore through the house, sprinting into the nursery, my heart hammering in my chest. Harper was there, safe, sleeping peacefully, but when I looked up at the baby monitor, the camera light was off. Someone had hacked it. By morning, Marcus, my head of security, had combed through every inch of our property. "Ethan," he said grimly, "whoever this is, they're inside your life. They know your house, your security, your family." I stared at him, cold dread filling my veins. This wasn't just about Caleb anymore. This was war. And I didn't even know who the enemy really was. That night, I found another envelope on our doorstep. No postage, no fingerprints. Inside was a single piece of paper. 5 words printed in bold black ink. The inheritance is not yours. Beneath it, a date. October 14th. 5 days from now. I didn't know what the inheritance was. I didn't know why it mattered. But as I stared at the note, one thing became terrifyingly clear. This wasn't about revenge. It was about something much bigger, much darker. The note sat on my desk like a loaded gun. The inheritance is not yours. October 14th. 5 days. 5 days until... What? I didn't know if this was a threat, a warning, or both. But one thing was clear. Everything traced back to Stockton. Back to Caleb. Back to the family I thought I'd left behind. That night, while Savannah rocked Harper to sleep, I went down to the wine cellar, locked the door, and opened my laptop. I pulled up every public record I could find about my parents and Caleb. Birth certificates, property deeds, old financial filings. Most of it was normal. Until it wasn't. There was a property listed under my parents' names that I'd never heard of before. It wasn't our old house. This one was in Carmel, Bethesda, registered 15 years ago, around the same time Caleb supposedly died. And here's the kicker. The property wasn't just a house. It was an abandoned bank. I zoomed in on the aerial view. The building was hidden behind coastal pines, its entrance gated off. According to county records, it hadn't been operational since 1998. But last year, someone had paid the back taxes in full. Someone was keeping it alive. I had to see it for myself. I didn't tell Savannah where I was going. Early the next morning, I drove 3 hours north along the jagged coastline. The fog rolling thick over Highway 1. The closer I got to Carmel, the heavier my chest felt. Like my body already knew I was driving straight into something I wasn't ready for. When I reached the property, my breath caught in my throat. The old bank stood at the edge of a cliff, its white stone facade cracked and stained with salt from the sea breeze. Iron bars covered the windows. The rusted sign above the door read, Pioneer Trust and Reserve, and yet there was a black SUV parked outside. It killed the engine and crouched behind a cypress tree, watching. A man in a gray suit stepped out of the SUV, glanced around cautiously, then unlocked the gate with a key. He disappeared inside. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Finally, I crept up to the side of the building and peered through a shattered window. What I saw made my blood run cold. Stacks of cash. Dozens of crates. And in the center of the dusty lobby, a massive steel vault door stood open. This wasn't an abandoned bank. It was a front. No. I pulled out my phone and started snapping photos, but a voice behind me froze me in place. Shouldn't have come here, Ethan. I turned slowly. Caleb stood 10 feet away, a pistol at his side. Older now, harder, a scar cutting across his jaw, but unmistakably my brother. Caleb! My voice cracked. I thought you were dead. He tilted his head, smirking faintly. That's what they wanted you to think. They? Who the hell is they? Before he could answer, a second voice cut through the air like a blade. Step away from him, Ethan. I spun around. Marcus, my head of security, pointing a gun at me. For a moment, none of us moved. The ocean crashed violently against the rocks below, spray misting the air. Caleb glared at Marcus. You don't have to do this. Marcus's jaw tightened. You don't understand, Caleb. This was never Ethan's to begin with. I stepped back, my voice rising. What the hell are you talking about? What's in this bank? Neither of them answered. Then Caleb whispered, they never told you, did they? About Dad. A pit opened in my stomach. What about him? Caleb's smirk faded. Richard wasn't just fixing cars to pay the bills. He was running black money for the Armitage Syndicate, laundering hundreds of millions through this bank. When it all went south, they came for us. Mom cut a deal. Dad vanished. And me. He tapped the scar on his jaw. I didn't stay dead. I became theirs. I shook my head, disbelief clawing at me. No, that's impossible. He was just a mechanic, Caleb sneered. Open your eyes, Ethan. You're living in a mansion funded by blood money you didn't even know existed. I felt sick. My entire life, everything I'd built, everything I thought I'd escaped. It was all tangled in a web I never knew I was part of. Marcus spoke again, his voice low and steady. Walk away, Ethan. Take your wife, take your daughter, and forget this place exists. If you stay, the syndicate won't just come for you. They'll come for Harper. My blood turned to ice. You knew? I whispered. All this time, Marcus. You were supposed to protect us. I was protecting you, he said through clenched teeth, till you started digging where you shouldn't. Caleb's gaze softened. Ethan, listen to me. There's more at stake here than you know. The inheritance isn't money, it's leverage. The syndicate killed to keep it buried. And now, because of you, they know Harper exists. I stared between them, my chest heaving. I don't understand. What does my daughter have to do with any of this? Caleb looked at me like he pitied me. Because, little brother, he said quietly, Harper is the last Cole heir, and they want her. That night, I drove back to Malibu shaking, my hands clamped so tightly on the wheel they ached. Savannah met me at the door, Harper on her hip, panic etched into her face. Ethan, what's wrong? I couldn't speak. I just pulled her into my arms, holding her and Harper as if sheer force of will could keep them safe. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't about my past anymore. It was about my daughter's future. And October 14th, 5 days away, was no longer just a date. It was a countdown. By the time I got home, the October air had turned sharp and cold, cutting through my jacket like a blade. Malibu nights were never this silent. Even the waves sounded distant, muted, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. 5 days left. 5 days until October 14th. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I sat in Harper's nursery, watching her tiny chest rise and fall, gripping the baby monitor like a lifeline. Every shadow on the wall felt like a threat. Every creak of the house like a warning. Caleb's words kept replaying in my head. The inheritance isn't money. It's leverage. Leverage for what and why Harper? By morning, I couldn't wait any longer. I called Caleb. You need to tell me everything, I said, pacing the balcony while the Pacific glittered beneath the sun. No riddles, no half-truths. What does the syndicate want with my daughter? On the other end, Caleb hesitated before answering. It's not about what they want from Harper, he said slowly. It's about what she represents. Dad signed something, Ethan, before he vanished. A contract giving the syndicate access to assets hidden under the Cole name. It's worth hundreds of millions. But the catch is, control of those assets passes through bloodline only. My stomach sank. Meaning Harper's birth changed everything. Before she was born, I was the last Cole heir on paper. They owned me. But now, Caleb exhaled sharply. Now they need her. With her name, they get everything. I felt sick. Then we leave. We disappear. You can't, Caleb snapped. They've been watching you for months. They know every move you make. Ethan, the only way out is to give them something bigger than Harper. I froze. What are you talking about? Before Caleb could answer, the line went dead. I turned around and nearly collided with Savannah. She stood in the doorway, pale, her eyes darting between me and the phone. Ethan, she whispered, we need to talk. Something in her voice stopped me cold. What is it? She hesitated, then said, I know who the syndicate is. For a moment I thought I'd misheard her. What do you mean, you know? Savannah swallowed hard. Before you and I met, I was engaged to a man named Victor Armitage. The name hit me like a punch to the chest. Armitage, I repeated, as in the Armitage Syndicate. She nodded, her lips trembling. I broke it off when I found out what he was involved in, but Ethan, I never told you. I thought it was behind me. I thought leaving him meant I was safe. But now, I stepped back, trying to breathe, but the walls felt like they were closing in. You kept this from me, my voice cracked. Savannah, they've been in our house. They've been watching us. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't know they'd come for us. I didn't know about Harper. I thought I left that life behind. But as she said it, something in my chest went cold, because I realized maybe Savannah hadn't been the one keeping secrets. Maybe she'd been the leverage all along. That night, Marcus, my so-called head of security, called and asked me to meet him at a safe house inland. He claimed it was for our protection, that Harper and Savannah would be safer off the grid. Every instinct screamed not to trust him. But with October 14th looming and no answers, I felt cornered. I told Savannah to pack a bag for Harper. By the time we reached the safe house, a one-story cabin buried deep in the hills above Topanga Canyon, my pulse was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Marcus met us at the door, his expression unreadable. Inside, he said curtly. I hesitated. Where's Caleb? Marcus's jaw tightened. He won't be coming. I didn't like the way he said it. Inside, the lights were dim, the air heavy with the scent of old wood. On the table sat a single black feather. Savannah stiffened beside me. Marcus shut the door. You should have walked away, Ethan. You and your brother both. I stepped in front of Savannah and Harper, my fists clenched. If you touch them, he raised a hand. Leave them then, and that's when I heard it. Engines outside, a convoy. Through the blinds, I saw 3 black SUVs pulling up silently, their headlights cutting through the trees. Savannah clutched Harper, her breath ragged. God. Marcus lowered his voice, almost pleading. Give them what they want, Ethan. Sign Harper's guardianship over to the syndicate. You'll live. She'll live. You're insane, I spat. You expect me to hand my daughter over to these people? I expect you to survive, Marcus said, his voice breaking for the first time. 'Cause if you don't, none of you make it out of tonight. I grabbed Savannah's hand, pulling her toward the back door. But before we could move, the cabin's windows exploded inward. Masked men swarmed in, guns raised, shadows slicing through the dust and broken glass. I dove behind the table, pulling Savannah and Harper down with me. Bullets tore through the wood, and then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. Enough, I froze. My father stepped into the doorway. Alive, older, and holding a gun. Dad, I breathed. He scanned the room with cold, sharp eyes before locking them on me. Get up, Ethan. I hesitated, my heart hammering. You lied, I said hoarsely. You faked Caleb's death. You disappeared. You dragged us into this. A flicker of something. Regret, maybe, passed over his face. Then it was gone. Son, he said softly. You're either with me tonight, or you're dead by sunrise. And behind him, through the shattered window, I saw Caleb emerge from the trees, gun in hand, aiming directly at our father. The cabin was silent for a heartbeat. Savannah clutched Harper so tightly I could hear her shallow breaths. Marcus stood frozen by the door, his gun lowered now as if even he knew the next few seconds would decide everything, and then Caleb spoke. Step away from him, Ethan. I turned. Caleb was standing just beyond the shattered window, his pistol raised, his eyes locked on our father like a predator ready to strike. The scar on his jaw caught the faint moonlight, but it was his expression that scared me most. Cold, calculated, my father didn't flinch. He aimed his own gun, not at Caleb, but at me. Ethan, he said, his voice low but sharp as broken glass. You need to come with me now. No arguments, no questions. If you stay here, Savannah dies. Harper dies. You die. I couldn't breathe. Why? I demanded. Why us? Why Harper? What the hell's going on? Caleb snarled, stepping closer, his voice trembling with restrained rage. Tell him, Dad. Go on. Tell him why the syndicate's been hunting him since before he could crawl. My father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Caleb's laugh was bitter, jagged. You want me to do it? Fine, I'll do it. He turned to me, his eyes burning. The inheritance they keep talking about. It isn't just money, Ethan. It's control. Dad was never just some washed-up mechanic. He was the syndicate's accountant. He moved hundreds of millions for them, and then he stole it, every cent. My stomach dropped. Caleb's voice grew harder. Before he disappeared, he stashed everything under an alias. Our family name. You, me, Harper. We're the keys to unlocking it. They thought I was dead, so they didn't care. But then you went and built coal estates, slapped the name across half of California, made us visible again. I felt dizzy. So that's why they want Harper, I whispered. My father finally spoke, his voice hoarse. I did it to protect you. To give you a life I couldn't? Caleb barked out a hollow laugh. Protect us? You faked my death? Abandoned Mom? Left Ethan to fend for himself? And you call that protection? You don't understand? My father snapped. If I hadn't made them believe you were dead, Caleb, they would have carved you up for leverage. They would have done the same to Ethan. Caleb's grip on his gun trembled, just for a moment. But then the sharp click of safeties being released outside shattered the silence. Through the broken windows, I saw masked syndicate enforcers circling the cabin, their rifles raised. We were surrounded. Suddenly Marcus moved. In a blur, he shoved Savannah and Harper behind the overturned table and yelled, "Down!" Gunfire erupted deafening in the small space. Splinters of wood exploded around us as bullets chewed through the cabin walls. I grabbed Savannah's hand and dragged her toward the back hallway, while Marcus returned fire with terrifying precision. Caleb ducked through the window, sliding across the floor, firing back at the masked men. Our father covered the front door, his jaw tight, every shot measured. For one insane moment, the three of us, father, son, and son, fought together against the same enemy, and then I heard it. "Scream, Savannah." I spun around just in time to see one of the syndicate men dragging her out through the back door. Harper clutched against her chest. "No," I roared, sprinting after them, Caleb right behind me. Outside, chaos reigned. The SUVs idled with their doors open, lights cutting across the dark clearing. Two masked men shoved Savannah toward the middle vehicle, while another ripped Harper from her arms. I didn't think. I just moved. I tackled the man holding Harper, ripping my daughter from his grasp as Caleb put 2 bullets into his chest. Savannah screamed my name, but before I could get back to her, another gunshot cracked through the night. Savannah fell. Everything stopped. I dropped to my knees beside her as blood bloomed across her white sweater, her hazel eyes wide with shock. "Stay with me," I begged, my hands pressing uselessly against the wound. "Savannah, please, stay with me." Her lips trembled as she reached up, brushing Harper's cheek with her fingertips. "Promise me," she whispered. "Don't let them. Just take her. I promise," I choked out, tears blinding me. Her hand slipped from Harper's face and fell limply to the dirt. For a second, I couldn't hear anything but my own ragged breathing, and then something inside me broke. I stood slowly, Harper in my arms, and turned to face the syndicate enforcers. My vision tunneled. The roar of gunfire faded into a low, violent hum. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I became something else. By the time the dust settled, the SUVs were wrecked, the ground littered with bodies. Caleb stood across from me, chest heaving, gun smoking. Marcus limped toward us, blood streaking his face, while my father leaned against the shattered cabin door, reloading calmly as if none of it rattled him. Savannah's body lay beneath a blanket Caleb had silently placed over her. I clutched Harper to my chest, swaying slightly numb. Caleb's voice broke through the ringing in my ears. "They won't stop, Ethan. This was just one branch. The syndicate will send more." I stared at him, my voice hoarse. "Then we burn it down." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "All of it." "All of it," I said, my jaw tight. "Every cent Dad stole. Every name. Every secret. We'll use their inheritance against them." My father met my eyes, something dark flickering behind his calm expression. "If you do this, there's no going back." I shifted Harper in my arms, pressing my lips against her tiny forehead. "There's nothing left to go back to. It's been 6 months since that night." Marcus disappeared, leaving behind nothing but a burner phone and a single text. They're still watching. Caleb and I now move like ghosts, living off-grid. Dismantling the syndicate piece by piece, hitting them where it hurts most. Every name we expose, every offshore account we drain, every stronghold we burn. It's one more step toward keeping Harper safe. But sometimes, late at night, when Harper cries in her sleep, I remember Savannah's last words. "Don't let them take her." And I wonder if I can keep that promise. Because 2 weeks ago, I found something tucked under Harper's crib. A black feather. This time, carved into the quill, were 4 chilling words. "This isn't over, Ethan." I stared at it for a long time, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Then I picked Harper up, holding her close as she stirred against my chest, and whispered into her tiny ear, "They'll have to kill me first. Now I want to ask you something. If you were me, if the people hunting you would never stop, would you keep running forever? Or would you turn around and burn their entire world to the ground? What would you do?"